It's called a memoir, but it's really not about me. It was basically about us. It was our generation and what we went through in the last 40 years as seen through my eyes.
Hello and welcome again to Chino y Chicano. I'm Enrique Serna. For 36 years, Lori Matsukawa was a well-known and admired reporter and anchor at King 5 News. She not only covered local and regional news, but also traveled to China when former Governor Gary Locke returned to his ancestral homeland. Lori also had the opportunity to cover the Winter Olympic Games in Salt Lake City and Vancouver, British Columbia. Now, since her retirement in 2019, she stayed active, volunteering in the Asian community, and she's written 2 books, Brave Mrs. Sato, a children's book, and Being There, a memoir of an Asian American journalist. She chronicles her journey into journalism and talks candidly about some personal matters that she has faced in her life. Talk about this, doing a memoir. Was that kind of challenging? Did you feel, do I have enough material here? I'm telling my own story.
You know, it's called a memoir, but it's really not about me. It was basically about us. It was our generation and what we went through in the last 40 years as seen through my eyes. I felt that I wanted to write down on paper things that we as a generation experienced and pass it on to the young ones, right? So they can understand where we came from, where they came from. They can understand all that has been laid down for them to support them, to encourage them, to move them forward. I just wanted like a history book of stories that may not be remembered
Right.
unless it's put down in a book.
Yeah.
So that was the whole motivation. It was to put down on paper our generation's story as seen through my eyes.
So let's start with really what kind of launched you on this journey to eventually become a journalist, and that is becoming Miss Teenage America in 1974. And the book opens with the reaction of your family as they hear it over the radio, I guess, and everybody's calling, and there's a little bit of madness. I gotta wonder that what would have happened if you had not become Miss Teenage America, because really that seemed to open the door for you becoming a journalist. Otherwise, you might have been a music teacher.
That's right. I would have been a piano teacher because I adored my piano teacher. If it hadn't been for the Miss Teenage America pageant, I probably would not have even thought of becoming a journalist, less a television journalist, because I really was interested in pursuing music. But it was perhaps preordained or it was meant to be, because when I look back at all the things that happened before the contest, things were kind of pushing me into the direction of the contest and journalism. When I was young, I loved to make up stories. I liked to write my own little kitty newspapers. I would make up stories and write them down. I was a voracious reader. I read books a lot. In fact, I would, make up stories and talk about them out loud. And my mom would just be mortified because she says, "Oh my God, the neighbors are going to think she's wacko."
Yeah, stop talking to yourself.
Yeah,
I
stop
remember that's
talking.
what you wrote. Yeah.
But when I think back, I was into writing and I was into this kind of storytelling. So who knows, I may have become a journalist, but
You
I
grew up in,
didn't,
go
yeah,
ahead.
I didn't think about it. I didn't think about it.
You grew up in Hawaii,
Mhm.
and your upbringing there, culturally, all of that, your parents growing up there, everything that they dealt with. I mean, you had kind of an all American growing up in many ways, but you also had the Hawaii part of it, which really played a big role.
I think Hawaii is a very nurturing place for kids because everyone there is a minority, quote unquote. You have to just get along because no, there's no big overriding controlling group, or not an obvious one anyway. So we all learned about each other's cultures. We learned to look beyond color and country of origin, and we just kind of learned to enjoy one another and the skills and background everybody brought to the table. It was a very benign, very loving, nurturing kind of environment, and I think that helped a lot to build up confidence. And I noticed that people from Hawaii have this kind of um, kind and even open and energetic kind of approach to life in general because that's what they experienced back home.
Yeah. You're right, though, that you were kind of trying to find yourself as you were growing up there, and that you had your own confidence issues of how you looked, fitting in. But it was actually kind of the arts and the music and the debate that opened up the door really for you to kind of blossom.
That's right. I was the typical ugly duckling. I had braces, glasses, knock knees, pimples. Therefore, I had no boyfriend, so I had a lot of extra time on my hands. So that gave me, an opportunity to join the speech club, which had competitions on weekends, and to join the choir and apply my ukulele skills that I learned from my uncle. And it was just an opportunity to just kind of get involved in all kinds of things that, believe it or not, would make for a great journalism background. You begin to learn about other people's stories and what it means to tell them through song and dance, and you learn about being on stage, having that stage presence by being a performer. And when you're in a speech competition, you learn to look that audience in the eye and convince them that your story is so important and that the two of you are the only ones in the room. So little did I know that these were all skills that you could apply to being a journalist and even a broadcast journalist. But again, it wasn't until college when I even thought of broadcast journalism. I was thinking maybe I could become a print journalist, like all those print journalists I met when I was traveling as Miss
Yeah.
Teenage America. And Because there weren't that many women and there weren't that many women of color journalists on the air, right? Until my managing editor at the newspaper where I was interning said, "Hey, you ever thought about, being a broadcast journalist? They're hiring women these days." And I'm like, "Really?" So college, that's pretty late to be thinking about, adjusting into a broadcast career.
Right. Let's go back and talk a little bit about more about this teenage America. How did how did you end up even applying or getting in the running for that whole thing?
Well, as a, lower middle income kid going to public school, I was looking for college scholarship money. And a friend of mine came up and said, "Hey, if you join this contest, you might, you have a chance of winning a college scholarship, $10,000, and it doesn't have a bathing suit competition, so you might even have a chance." I said, "Yes, great, thank you, thank you." And so I did enter it, just thinking, okay, no bathing suit and 10,000 bucks. That's worth, a little effort. And because I was not into the whole pageant thing, there are some women who are and young women who are really into that. That becomes kind of like their life is
Right.
pageants. But I had no experience with pageants. I just kind of said, okay, I'll enter. I'll play the piano for my talent and I'll just answer these judges' questions. And I was so shocked when I was surprised to represent Honolulu. So I said, all right. And so Miss Teenage Honolulu gets to go to the national pageant in Fort Worth, Texas, because our main sponsor was the Dr. Pepper Company. And so we were getting ready to go, and I had to learn everything about being glamorous from a model that the store that was sponsoring my trip kind of recruited. And she was awesome. Ellie and I became lifelong friends after that. But everything, walking, sitting, how to eat, how to stand properly, what do you do with your coat? What do you do? I mean, she knew everything, all the things you needed to know to, you know, be a proper young lady.
Yeah,
She
at the
was
time.
awesome.
So you're you're what you had to do a talent thing, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Talk about that.
So, for the Miss Teenage Honolulu pageant, I did a piano piece. And I thought it was a good piano piece, but then our department store advisors were saying, everybody in that contest is going to play the piano. Can't you do something else? Can you do a hula or something? I said, well, as a matter of fact, I can do a Maori poi ball dance because I've been doing that in our high school choir.
Yeah.
This is what I mean. If all these things that I was picking up and learning along the way kind of pushed me into this point. And I said, why don't I do this Maori poi ball dance? And they said, great, sounds good to me. So I said, okay, I've done it, for hundreds of times in Waikiki. I can do it on TV, national TV. So got my friends together, we recorded our own music, and I did a Maori poi ball dance. And it was really amazing because yes, all the other girls played the piano, but there was only one person that did a Maori poi ball dance. And the second thing was that, it was unique and it provided conversation for the judges and me, and the MC, Ken Berry, talked about it. He says, what is the origin of these poi balls? And it just became a wonderful way to get to people to know me and for me to engage in conversation with other people.
Yeah, you had something very unique that not everybody was doing. I mean, let's face it, it was just completely different. So did all the performances go well when you were doing
No.
that?
Well, okay, so for the Miss Teenage America pageant, we had several rehearsals. And so, all my poi ball rehearsals were flawless. I just did the routine, boom, boom, boom. The poi balls were perfect. On the actual night of the contest, live on CBS in front of millions of viewers, the poi balls hit each other and got tangled. And I had to untangle them and continue dancing. And I'm over there thinking, oh God, please don't tangle, don't tangle. Boom, they got tangled, but I was able to untangle them and finish the dance. And who knows, maybe that convinced the judges, well, maybe she knows what to do in an emergency.
Yeah, how do you handle pressure and adversity on national television?
On
Yeah.
national
No,
television.
really? Yeah, that's pretty
I
good.
was so angry though, because all the rehearsals were perfect, and there it was on national TV.
And you can still do that, right? You
I
still
can
do
do that.
Yeah, that's a hell of a talent. I mean, at our age, to be able to continue to do that. And so
It's kind of like riding a bike, Enrique.
Right.
You could ride a bike. So if you learn poi balls, you could do poi balls too.
I'm not so sure I could ride a bike anymore. I haven't done it for so long. You got to travel all over the country, meet all sorts of folks, different celebrities. Tell me about that experience. I mean, you're 17. It's kind of, was it ever overwhelming or was it just always fun?
It was a job. So it was fun because that you don't do a lot. Well, I guess you do a lot. You have to be on time, you have to be on, you have to answer questions, you have to give speeches that you write yourself, right? You have to write your own speeches. You have to write thank you notes. I did a lot of doing that. And it is intimidating to meet, like, there's a picture in my recent memoir of me with Colonel Sanders. There really was a Colonel Sanders.
Oh, yeah.
The Kentucky Fried Chicken
I
guy.
met him once, yes.
Yeah. So here I am. I'm meeting Colonel Sanders and Mickey Dolenz from the Monkees.
And Cher. You met Cher.
And Cher. And I'm like, wow, this is fantastic. But, when you're there, you're kind of there, you're working with them. You're not there as a fangirl. You're there to work. Like when we were on the Sonny and Cher show, I had to like do a little shtick with Sonny and Cher. So I had to memorize my lines, be on time for makeup, and boom, we taped it and it was done. But that moment with Cher in the makeup room where she's saying, "Come on in, honey, sit down," and she was just so warm because they're like that.
Yeah.
I thought meeting all of these celebrities was like that. Every celebrity I met was like that. They're just normal, wonderful people. I never met a really, nasty person.
You're lucky.
They were all nice.
That's good.
They were.
So you go to Stanford for college. Hawaii girl suddenly transplanted to California. What was that like? I mean, was it intimidating? Stanford is like no slouch school, let's face it. I mean, you have to be pretty damn good to get in there, Lori.
I don't know if it's typical. I have heard that it's typical of many students who are accepted at Stanford, especially those of us who don't go to prep schools and private schools, to be extremely intimidated at Stanford and to think that you were an admissions mistake.
Mm.
That was my first impression. I said, "Oh my goodness, no, this is not good," because everybody was super smart and super talented. Like they would sit at the piano and just play concertos. And I was like, oh no, I never played the piano ever again
Mm.
publicly because I was so intimidated by the piano players that were in my dorm. And, but I learned also that after a while, you find your niche, you find what you're good at, and you can hold your own. Because everybody at that school is good at something, and so are you. So once you get to that point, say, "Hey, I'm pretty good at writing articles for the Stanford Daily. I'm a pretty good journalist." Once that kind of gets into your head, then you relax and you know, explore and grow. You have to just get over that initial feeling of I don't belong here.
Yeah,
You do belong. You have, yeah,
yeah,
you
the
do
imposter
belong.
syndrome and how you deal with all of that. Yeah.
You know, I shouldn't be here, but then you have to say, no, I do belong here. And yeah, and it becomes easier. It
So,
was kind of weird though to be from Hawaii and then mixing with all of these Asians who were from the mainland US because the continental US Asians were different from the Asians from Hawaii.
how
They
so?
didn't have
How so?
they didn't have that I think they faced more intense racial prejudice as a group than those of us of color who were living in Hawaii. Like, remember, I said everybody had to get along because there was no real majority or
Right,
minority.
right, right.
But definitely, I think Asian Americans on the West Coast, continental West Coast, were a minority, and they felt it, especially those whose families were incarcerated during World War II.
Yeah.
That was huge for them. Yeah, so it took a little, learning and understanding and getting to know the history and the background of everybody.
Right. So from
Yeah.
Stanford, you eventually decided to take a shot at TV news. You actually interned in San Francisco, right?
I did,
Yeah,
I
and
did.
I think it was at KPIX, which there was a very prominent Seattle connection there with Wendy Takuda, who had been
Yes.
a reporter at King, very lovely person, Wendy, and then
Mhm.
became a big deal in San Francisco at KPIX. How did she help
Yes.
you? How did she help you during your time?
She literally told me how she had been taken under the wing of Barbara Tanabe, who had worked at Como before going into San Francisco and then later to Honolulu. But it was like she had been nurtured by Barbara Tanabe. So she looks at me and says, "Well, you know how they say you have to kind of like pass it on. So I'm passing it on. I'm going to take you under my wing and let's go out and do a story." So it was just Wendy being Wendy and saying, "Hey, you know, yeah, you can job shadow me. Let's go out." And she helped me put together my first my audition tape. I had one story on the tape. It was me doing a stand up and pulling file tape about people in earthquakes. Because my little story was about how to survive an earthquake in San Francisco, you know, kind of a thing. And she was just being Wendy. She was just being open and supportive. And that impressed me kind of, I think, for life. And that's why to this day, I like to do the same thing. I like to take folks under my wing. And
Yeah,
I know you do it all the time too. You know,
yeah.
these younger kids come up to you and say, "Hey, can I job shadow you or
Oh
can I
yeah.
talk to you?" Yes, absolutely. Why else would I be here if it wasn't for the kindness of others before
Yeah,
me?
I didn't I didn't have mentors when I first
Mhm,
started because
mhm,
there were no Latinos. I mean, when I got to Seattle, I mean, out of college, I was the only one. And there were African Americans that were working there and things, not that we didn't connect, but I didn't have someone from my background that I could look to. And a lot of times I felt really overwhelmed. But
mhm.
you're right, I think now that I'm much older and all that, but I really did think to myself, if I ever get a chance, I'm going to pass it forward,
Mhm.
and make sure that I'm going to
Yeah.
help somebody out, which, you've done. I think all of us that were in that generation, that's something that stayed in the business for a long time, that became a part of our DNA in helping folks. Yeah.
Exactly. And you and I have been on panels and have
Oh, yeah.
spoken before about the
Yeah.
idea of being the only one in the room, or maybe only one of two in the whole market.
Right.
And it's important that we connect and support each other. And that's why when Asian American Journalists Association started its initial chapter, we started raising scholarship money for all minority students. It's called
Right.
the Northwest Journalists of Color
Color. Right.
Scholarship, because we said, hey, why should we just focus on one ethnic group when all the groups need to be supported and uplifted? So that's
Yeah.
been a real successful
And yeah,
program
you've
for
done
everybody.
thousands of dollars that have gone right through the
Yes,
years. Yeah. And
yes.
across the board of journalists that have had that opportunity to get a
So,
little bit of help as they're going to school. So that is important, even more so now in these times. I
yes,
think that's definitely the case.
yes.
Larry, I want to, before we move on, talk a bit more about your career. There are at least a couple of stories that you tell in the book that I found pretty surprising in how you were open about it. And one had to do with being a teenager, a young woman walking home from school, I guess, and
Mhm.
you encountered someone who assaulted you with the idea of sexually assaulting you. Tell me about that experience and how that affected you.
When I think back about that assault, I cringe at what could have been, and I become extremely grateful that someone took the time to get involved and stop what could have been a real disaster. It probably also instilled in me a sense of not being afraid to get involved, because when I was being dragged, literally dragged along a street toward who knows what kind of fate, a young military man and his wife were stopped their car. It was right on an open street in a neighborhood, not far from a very busy, road, and he actually stopped because he could see there was something going on. There are books and on the ground, and there's this worried little young woman and this husky guy dragging her by the arm. Oh yeah, this looks like something. And he actually said, "Hey, what's happening?" And the guy goes, "Oh, it's nothing. She's my girlfriend. We're having a fight or something." And the guy goes, "Let her go." And he gets out of the car, right? And the assaulter just immediately lets go and dashes off. And thank goodness he did that, because who knows what would have happened, especially because the assaulter's buddy was waiting in the carport down the street. So there was two guys that were potentially like thinking nefarious thoughts. So, I was so grateful. I was so grateful, and we found out that he was working at he was a soldier at a nearby base, army base. My dad was in the Army Reserve. He wrote a letter to the man's commanding officer and, and said thank you, and he was so grateful that he, came to my rescue,
Yeah.
literally.
How old were you when this happened?
I was in the 10th grade, so what does that make me?
Yeah, probably
15,
what, 15?
14,
Yeah, yeah,
15 or
yeah.
14. But the reason why I mentioned it is because I interviewed Connie Chung when she was here, we're talking about her memoir, and she was sexually assaulted by her family physician.
Oh my
She
gosh.
was actually sexually assaulted by her family physician. And there are stories of sexual assault and assault among so many women, not just journalists, but all kinds of women. The whole idea of sexual assault is mind-boggling when you think
Right.
about how many people have experienced it, and it's about time that we all talk about it. And so
Right.
that's why I chose to talk about it. I'm not being brave. All these other women were way braver than I, and they spoke out first.
How did that affect you?
Well, I didn't care for guys for a long time. I
I can
didn't have a boy
understand that.
I didn't have a boyfriend, and that was okay with me, pretty much. But I decided, well, that was just one bad apple, and it would be fun to go out on dates and have guy friends as well as female friends. So, I just kind of got over it and went out on dates and just took things slowly and it's okay. If you don't want to, move things along so fast, it's okay. And I felt okay doing that, you
Did you
know.
feel fearful for a long time?
Not so much fearful, but like, oh, I know what he has in mind and I'm not going to fall for it. I felt very defensive more than fearful, like, leave me alone. But I think, you just can't lead your life that way. I mean, for me, I couldn't be, you know, suspicious and angry all the time because most people I met were very fine people. It was just that one jerk when I was 14 or 15 that was not a good person.
Yeah. Well, you eventually got your first job in, what was it, Redding, California,
Reading, yes. Uh,
where you did everything.
that's right. And that's again, Enrique, that's why we write these things, is
Yeah.
because the generation of people who are doing news today have never lived in a world where they didn't have cell phones, they didn't have laptops, they didn't, word processors.
And,
Wow,
and
what a
have
revolution.
Google, have Google.
Google and
Yeah, I know.
email,
Yeah.
even
And
email.
GPS. I could struggling with those Thomas maps when you're sent out on a
Thomas,
story. I could never read those damn things.
so that was part of it too, just writing down the fact that, oh yes, I had to shoot my own 16 millimeter silent film because our station was so small and they didn't have audio track projectors. We had to shoot silent 16 millimeter film, and if we wanted audio we had to record it on a separate tape recorder and mix the two live on the air. So there's the picture of the babbling brook, but the babbling has to come from an audio card
Yeah.
that is mixed live on the air. Can you imagine
And you'd never
the
shot
disaster?
any film before, right?
No, no. And so the news director says, okay, here's your camera. It's a Bolex, one of those
Yeah.
hand wind, you wind up the
Yeah.
camera by hand. And he says, if it's a sunny day, put the f-stop on 16. And if it's not a sunny day, put it on 8. Here. And that was all. That was all I got. And this is how you thread the film.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous. But
So along the way here, you met your husband, right? Was
yeah,
it in Reading?
Larry and I met
Larry?
in Reading.
Larry
Mhm.
Blackstock, yeah.
Yeah. And he was the director. He actually did my audition.
Yeah.
So he was the director in the control room, and the news director said, okay, do your audition read. And I did my read. I stumbled. So Larry thought, oh, she's not gonna make it. She stumbled, right?
Yeah.
And so he was really shocked when a couple weeks later I walk into the station and say, "Hi, everybody." He's like, "Oh, she got hired."
Right.
And
Right.
so it was a wonderful friendship because he would be the director at night, running all the machines and commercials and microphones and cameras, and I would be on the desk looking at camera 1, looking at camera 2 because there's nothing automated. We didn't have a teleprompter even. And sometimes on hot nights, we would open the studio doors because it was so hot. We wanted to let in the breeze. And when we did that, these huge bugs would come in from the outdoors and they would land on your shoulder. These big mosquito eaters would come in and land on your shoulder. It was hilarious. Small
What a
market.
story. What a story.
Small market.
So anyway, you and Larry ended up becoming a team. I mean,
Mhm.
he followed you actually, didn't he? Into what, Oregon?
Into Oregon. We worked
In
in
Portland.
Portland. He worked at KGW and I worked at KPTV, which was an independent. And then I came to Como in Seattle, and then he got a job at Como.
Right.
And then I moved over to King and stayed there for the next 36 years.
Yeah.
And from Como, he was eventually hired to be the the operations director of Northwest Cable News. Basically, he created the world's first all digital TV station.
Right.
And when I tell people that, they go, "What? The world's first?" I said, "Yes." Before, how everyone today is digital,
Right.
but back then Nobody was digital. Everyone did everything on videotape.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Back in the
crazy.
day, came out of King. It came out of that whole operation there too.
Fifth floor out of the
Yeah, I
King fifth
remember that. The
floor,
fifth floor, yes, in the
right?
old building. Yeah, which is no more. I think Apple is located where
I
the
think
building
so.
was.
I
Yeah,
think so.
yeah.
Apple.
Anyway, so one of the things that you write about as well, which surprised me, is the fact that you and Larry got together, eventually got married, but before that, you became pregnant at a time when you were very, very young. And
Hmm.
what was you, 23?
Yeah,
And you write about you,
we were still unmarried. We weren't married then.
yeah.
We were still together, but we weren't married then.
But you write about having to make a decision of becoming, well, for one thing, becoming pregnant at that time. You were young, had a career, trying to figure out what to do, and you made a decision to have an abortion. Why did
Right.
you decide about to write about that?
I felt I had to be brutally honest, and I know it's controversial, and
Yeah.
many people will dislike my decision and perhaps dislike me as a result. But again, you have to always think about what what your purpose is. And I wanted to be a really good mom. I wanted to be a mom, and Larry wanted to be a dad. But at that time, we were just not in a position to be the kinds of parents we wanted to be. We couldn't be there because both of us were not making enough to really, survive and thrive.
Right.
And so we wouldn't be financially able to raise a child. We'd both have to be working, and then we wouldn't have perhaps the time to spend with that child and nurture it and raise it in a loving and stable home. We might, have to move and Larry came from a childhood where there was constant movement. There were 3 divorces.
Mhm.
It was just we just wanted the best for our child, because we had no qualms about getting married, but getting married and raising a child all at once was not what we were prepared to do, and we couldn't do it, or I felt I couldn't do it responsibly and feel good about it. And every dream I ever had up until then would just explode. I thought, that's it. This is not a good thing.
Yeah. Did you tell
And
your parents about this?
no. And that's why I only could write the memoir now because
Because
they
they
have
both
both
passed.
passed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it would have been a huge shame to them
Right.
because, in Japanese culture, you don't talk about shameful things in public. Um, so that's why in Japanese families, you don't know who in your family had to get married or decided to terminate a pregnancy or went to jail or right is suffering from
Right.
mental illness, or there are all kinds of terrible and decisions that have to be made in life, and they are they bring shame,
Right.
and that shame kind of festers if you don't talk about it.
Right.
And yeah, so
Life isn't perfect or easy, let's face it. And
no.
sometimes you have to make hard decisions. And
And what
uh,
what also inspired me to come out, as it were, was that one of the things I did was interview Cheryl Chow, former city councilwoman Cheryl Chow, when she came out to to me. She called me one day and said, "I want to
mm,
come out and I want to do it on King 5."
wow.
I was like, "What?" And I said, "Why?" And she says, "Well, you know, what are people gonna say? What are people gonna think?"
Right.
Me being Asian,
Exactly.
"What are people gonna think, Cheryl?"
Hey,
And she
Latinos do
says,
the same thing. Let me tell you.
and and Cheryl says, "Well, what are they gonna do to me now? Kill me?" Because at the time she was dying, right, from cancer.
Yeah, true.
And she says, "What are they gonna do to me now? Kill me?" And she says, "I'm coming out because I want every gay and lesbian child to know that it's okay to be gay, to be who you are, that you should live your best life, and it's okay."
Yeah.
And so that was really emotional, and that was meaningful, and that was brutally honest for her to say.
Right.
Who's gonna, yeah, what are they going to do to me now? Kill me?
Yeah.
And I want all the kids in my situation to know it's okay. We're not perfect, or even if we, yeah, but being gay is, it's who you are, and that's that. You are who you are, and that's okay. So,
Sometimes you just have to make tough decisions that aren't perfect, and uh, and I think you're right. If we don't talk about this stuff, all we do,
yeah.
particularly within our own cultures, which are
Mhm.
really bad talking about the tough stuff,
Yeah.
and which continues to be a problem. And
It
there's really no shame in it. It's actually, I just think the shame is more when we are putting people in a situation where we're criticizing because they speak out. But I think it's
mhm.
well worth doing about a lot of number of things. So I think you're pretty brave to talk about all this stuff, really.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, okay, your career in Seattle. Uh, 36 years at King. And of course, I was there for a lot of that time. And I always kind of wondered, okay, when, as you were working there, when is Lori going to become the acknowledged main female anchor? No, really. I mean, look, no knock against Jean Anderson. I knew Jean well. She was very good at what she did. She actually had a huge following. Margaret Larson was also there for a
Mhm.
brief period of time. But you had to wait a minute and a half or two or three or four before you got your opportunity. Did you feel like it was at times maybe it would never really happen?
It was a long wait. And even when I did, think that I was there, I was given the 11 o'clock weeknight position because Jean's schedule was changing and she wasn't going to do
Right.
11s anymore. So they said, "Well, we need an 11 o'clock anchor Monday through Friday." That was kind of like, oh, that's the opportunity to become a main anchor on a main show, Monday through Friday. Because remember, I was doing weekends
Yeah.
forever and a
Forever.
day,
Yeah.
and it seemed that all the journalists of color at King anyway were doing weekends. Hetty Kaufman,
Yeah.
James Satori, a lot of the people of color going through King at the
But you had
time.
also, when you came to King, I mean, you were doing a show called Top Story. That
Right.
was it was you and Mike James, and you were the co-anchor for that. Also, you guys reported the stories of
Mhm.
that. But you were in a 5 day a week thing where you were visible. So it's not like you didn't have the
Yeah.
chops to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
And thanks to you, because you had the chops to go ahead and have your own show, produce your own show, celebrate the
Yeah,
differences.
which we did
You
together
got,
for 9 years. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You got us on the air for half hour. Was it half hour
Half
show,
hour.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Half
Yeah.
hour show, which is significant
Yeah.
when it's produced by a journalist of color like yourself, and put on the air and features and highlights the
Yeah. That's what we
communities.
did.
So that's what we were trying our best to get into those
No.
plum
And
positions and
actually,
everything.
I don't know if you remember when I asked you to do that, because I got a lot of blowback on that. Because, and I don't know if we've ever really talked about this, but you know, doing that show, Celebrate the Differences, which it was back then considered a minority affair show. If I hadn't have done that show and others like it, I wouldn't have gotten an opportunity to learn how to host, to produce, to report.
Mhm.
It was that opportunity because I couldn't get it anywhere else. But there was always the concern about being pigeonholed in that. And
That's
I can't
right.
remember if we talked about that. Did we? I
I
don't know.
use that word in the book, and I
Yeah.
use it in there was a recent, Seattle Times article that
Right,
came
right,
out this
right.
Sunday, where we talk about that's every journalist of color's fear that they're gonna be
They'd be
pigeonholed
pigeonholed.
and put on the, Cinco de Mayo Bonodori beat, right? That's the only time they every kind of
Yeah.
cultural story they throw your way. But I came to the conclusion that, you know, we knew a lot about the
We
communities
did.
around here. why not? Why not share that knowledge with a broader audience? Because really, Enrique, if we don't cover it, no one's going to cover it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we became champions,
We
right?
did. We did become because of that. And actually I think you pretty much said yes to doing it. It was a matter of just working out the logistics, but you're always a great partner in all of this.
Yeah.
But I think the thing about it that I really appreciated and appreciated with you is that um, I think it opened the door for realizing that covering communities of color, that there were good stories there. And it
Yes.
was a matter of not being pigeonholed. It was like we were just doing good. There were stories, there are important stories there.
Mhm.
And so now I don't think that that is, I mean, look at King. They have Facing Race and all
Yeah.
of these things. So, but I do think without doing those shows, the coverage and the appearance of people of color on TV today
Mhm.
probably wouldn't have happened, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
But going back to the idea of mainstream anchoring. So I got this position, 11 o'clock Monday through Friday. But as I got it, and I'd only been doing it for a while, when I was basically demoted and kicked down to the 10 o'clock news on Kong, I said,
Mm.
wait, why? And they said, the reason was, oh, we want to increase viewership on King 5 News at 10 on Kong. And you said, so you're going to take me off the 11 and put me on the 10 o'clock on Kong, which had like a less than a
Yeah.
1 rating at they were just starting this news, and I said, "Really?" And it felt like, you're on the Mariners, main team, and then you're, like, sent
Right.
down to Tacoma. That's
Yeah.
what it felt like. Uh, and so it was kind of shocking. It felt like a demotion. I think it was in the eyes of a lot of people, a
Yeah. It
demotion,
was.
and so I was stuck with a decision of what do you do? Do you fight it? Do you claim discrimination? Because it felt that way. Uh,
Did
or
you think at all about leaving?
yeah, or do you leave and try to go somewhere else? And I mulled it over and I finally came to the conclusion that, well, heck, I have a platform still. It's a smaller platform. It's King 5 News at 10 on Kong, but I'm still in the station and I'm still filling in for Jean and the 11 o'clock anchor, who was Margaret Larson. And, so I'm still on the air and I still have a bit of a platform, so I can still do the important work that we had started of representing, of being there, of,
Right.
you know, encouraging young people, hey, I'm still working here and you can work in this industry too. You know, I didn't want to leave all that I had built over
Right.
all those years, all those relationships. So I said, okay, I'm going to stick around and I'm not going to go to court and everything like that. But I think it did uh, allow me to grow with the station. After I decided to just stick around, all of a sudden, my network dreams started coming true. I have dreamt for a long time of going to work for NBC, CBS, CNN, the networks.
Yeah.
And the opportunity came, but I couldn't leave my family. Isn't that weird?
No.
I I'd always wanted to work for NBC, and when NBC said, "Hey, you want to be a correspondent and live on the West Coast?" I said, no, I gave it up because I couldn't see moving the family over to
Right.
Los Angeles. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
who wants to do that? But so then decided to make King was my network, and it was a wonderful network. They sent me to the, New Hampshire primaries. They sent me to earthquakes in El Salvador. They sent me to Japan when the Apple trade started picking up. They sent me overseas, and I was doing network type work, but my network was King instead of,
You did the
NBC.
Olympics too, didn't you?
Yeah, I went to 2
Yeah.
Olympics.
Right. Right.
So it worked out, and actually, it was better for me because, we were still able to raise our son, and he was able to go to school, stay with his friends. Larry's job took off. He was able to work at NWCN. It was kind of like magic. It
Yeah.
was magic.
So it was a
So,
matter of making a decision and sticking with it. So yeah, it
yeah.
did work out. How long did it take before you became the main anchor?
I think it was 2 So 2 years later, after I was demoted, about 2.5 years later, two
Yeah.
years, Margaret left to work for another organization.
Right.
And they said, Lori, can you fill in for Margaret while we conduct a nationwide search for her replacement? So I said, sure, I'll fill in.
That's an interesting thing to be. Hey, I'm here. Why do you got
And I
to
never
waste
left.
your
No, but that's the
money?
thing. They said, can you fill in for her? I said, sure. And then I never left. I just stayed in that chair
Yeah.
for the next, 11 years, 14 years. I mean, it was a long time.
Hey, you waited them out. And I wonder how many execs left during that time, or producers and things,
Several must have,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
whatever
Our news
happened to that
directors.
nationwide search.
Yeah.
I wonder how many people they auditioned for that, but, I
Yeah.
was still
Well,
there.
you were there. You were sitting right there. So, as we wrap things up here, as you look back on being there and all the things that you've done in your career, what was, I guess, the one story you did that was most meaningful to you?
Well, I've already mentioned Cheryl Chow
Right.
coming out on King 5 News. That was quite meaningful
Yeah.
for her family, her community, our community, and the community of LGBTQ folks. So that was significant, but I think the biggest thrill for me would be following Governor Gary Locke on his first trade mission as the first Chinese American governor
Yeah.
in China.
Right.
And he went to visit his ancestral village. He visited multiple cities in China. And again, talk about your network experience. That was like working for the network, following an official who eventually met with the president. Then it was Jiang Zemin, and talking about trade and talking about schooling and education and talking about all kinds of important issues that affected the state of Washington, following this very popular governor and his very photogenic wife
Right.
through China was an amazing experience. Dave White, our photographer, worked so hard, and we had like 18-hour, 14-hour days every day. But it was an amazing experience, and it was kind of like my victory. It's like, yeah, I can do this kind of work.
Yeah.
I can do this kind of work. And so I I think that would be the highlight story.
So this business has changed so much since
Yeah.
you and I left it. And it seems, well, everything's in flux. It's kind of like
Mhm.
the world is in flux. So, and
Mhm.
journalism is especially today. But I guess advice would you give to those aspiring young people that want to be the next wave of journalists in this country, especially with the challenges that we have now? I mean, local journalism is challenged. Um, just also you're facing, these censorship efforts and all of
Mm.
these. But how do you keep people, inspired to become a journalist?
I encourage young people to always remember that their job is very important. It matters a lot in a democracy. Theirs is the only occupation that's protected by the First Amendment of the Constitution. So they have a responsibility, and if they feel, you know, that democracy is important and that sharing information, accurate information is important, then they should stick to their impulses and their gut feelings and pursue a career in journalism. Someone has to be the voice, the storyteller for the people, and that's the journalist. That's you. And
It,
we're here, us old journalists are here to support you and encourage you because we know it's an
yeah,
important job.
right.
So stick with it.
Yeah, it's important because it's also part of our country's history, and good or bad, someone has to report it and also call people out in tough times. So that's
Right.
what's important. Lori
Hold people, yeah,
Matsukawa,
hold people accountable.
hold
That's for
people
sure.
accountable. The book is called Being There. And hey, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me and to look back on all those years, and stuff. But yeah, there were a lot of great times, tough times
Hmm.
too, challenging times too. But I always look back and think that I was fortunate actually to even be in the business. So
Exactly. And
yeah,
thank you for all you do, encouraging young people and being there
yeah.
yourself.
Thanks, Lori. All
All
right.
right. Thanks, Enrique.
Take care.